So, welcome back to the second module. And now we were discussing about the last slide that we were discussing. That was the amazing application of a nano coating on various materials and how it can, like you can coat it on your gloves, you can coat it on various surfaces. This was the last, for example, the shoes that are coating, they don't get wet with the mud or the water. So, this we were doing. Another very important discovery in nanomedicine or nanotechnology was in 2003 when Naomi Hallas, Jennifer West, and Rebecca and Renata Pasculian at Rice University developed gold nanoshells, which, when tuned in size to absorb near infrared light, serve as a platform for integrated discovery, diagnosis, and treatment of breast cancer without invasive biopsies, surgeries, or systematically destructive radiation or chemotherapy. So, this was also a game changer, but still lots and lots of work needs to be done in this direction, and it is being done. But this is something which was very interesting at that time. And this you all will find very interesting too. This is the development of a nano car. So you see, again at the Rice University, James Tour and colleagues, they built a nanoscale car that was made up of oligophenylene ethylene with alkynyl excels and four spherical C60 fullerene buckyball wheels. So when you increase the temperature, the nano car would move on a gold surface, and as a result of the buckyball wheels turning, as in a conventional car, and when the temperature was above 300 degrees Celsius, it moved around too fast, so chemists could not keep track of it under the microscope, under the electron microscope. So very interestingly, this happened in 2006. So there was this nano car competition also, nano race. Six teams from around the world competed for that in that nano race. Like six labs, they designed their cars comprising of different materials. For example, at Rice University, they had used those buckyball wheels for turning the nano car. So this video says that the competition is still going on, but it obviously is finished. And the USA was the first one, and Austria was, I think, the second. The lab from Austria was the second one to win that nano race competition. So that was amazing. And if you remember, in the last module, I talked about nano generations, and I talked about third generation, in which the nanostructures can assemble themselves. This is something that we need, and we are moving in that direction. And this man, Nadrian Seaman, and his colleagues at New York University, they have created, they in 2009, they created several DNA-like robotic nanoscale assembly devices. One is a process for creating three-dimensional DNA structures using synthetic sequences of DNA crystals. But you have to remember that nanostructures are doing assembling themselves. So these can be programmed to self-assemble using, sticky ends and order, orientation. Those things have to be programmed. So this was also very amazing, and he won the prize in the nanotechnology for this also, Cliver Prize, I think so. So that was that, and now I'll talk about some really, great scientists who have really like they've pushed forward nanotechnology in a major way. So the first one is Richard Feynman, and this is his. There was this 1959 addressing a meeting of the American Physical Society at Caltech. He said there is plenty of room at the bottom in his lecture. So sub micro miniaturization was his latest passion at that time. And he said that if a small cell, in our body can perform so many functions, why can't we design something that can do that? And then he said that there is plenty of room at the bottom. Remember, I told you there are two approaches: bottom up, and top down approach. So he was talking about that bottom up approach, build atom by atom, molecule by molecule. That is what he was saying. And he at that time he see the thing about the great scientists is their vision. So at that time, he said this, that can we store all of the world's basic knowledge onto a pocket size, onto something which has the size of a pocket size pamphlet? And he was a maverick scientist, brilliant man. And I mean, most of you must be physicists, since it is a physics professor course, so you too must be knowing about him. So his charisma and his appeal was so, charming that there and then actually he instituted two small, like two prizes at that time, $2,000 prizes. At that time, $1,000 was something in 1959, for two achievements. So he said that first prize would be given to the guy who could reduce a page of a book by a factor of 25,000. And of course, that could have been read by an electron microscope. And second, to a guy who could build an electric motor in a 1 by 64th inch of a cube. So these were two challenges, and he obviously thought that this was something very tough. But in 3 years, he underestimated the ingenuity of engineers. So can you guess, out of these two, which one was achieved first? I mean, of course, you can't tell me that because this is not synchronous thing. But just take a moment in your mind to, just imagine which among these two would be was met first. So that was, of course, the creation of this electric motor that could fit in a 1 by 64th inch cube, and that was done by William McLellan of Caltech, who claimed this prize. And he actually built 10 of them, and he actually built them with crude tools like toothpicks, paintbrushes. But this was possible because if you see, at that time also watches used to be there, and micro miniaturization is there in watches also. So maybe he underestimated the ability of scientists or engineers to do this. But the second thing, to reduce the writing, like the to reduce a page of a book by a factor of 25,000, that took 15 years. And that was done by Tom Newman, who was a graduate student at Stanford University, using electron beam lithography. This was done in 1985, I think 3 years before Feynman died of cancer. So this man collected his prize. He took his text, this graduate student Tom Newman took his text from Charles Dickens, and he used electron beam lithography. And I did share with you one slide of dip in just a second, I'll just show you that slide. Just bear with me, I'm just trying to locate that slide, because I did tell you at that time that this slide is important, and we'll come back to this slide. So dip pen nanolithography, this was developed in 1999, and this makes it much easier to write. What Feynman had asked, what Feynman's challenge was, it is a much cheaper way to write dip pen nanolithography. But at that time in 1985, Tom Newman did write and did, like reduced the scale to 1 by 25,000. So please see this. This is a text from Feynman's lecture only. I'll just read it out a bit. As soon as I mention this, people tell me always miniaturization and how far it has progressed today. They tell me about the electric motors are about the size of the nail on your small finger, and there is a device on the market, they tell me, by which you can write the Lord's Prayer on the head of a pin. But that's nothing. That's the most primitive, halting step in the direction I intend to discuss. It is a staggeringly small world that is below. In the year 2000, when they look back at this age, they will wonder why it was not until the year 1960, 1959 or 60, that anybody began seriously to move in this direction. This is his text. Okay. What I want to tell you is that this has been written on a nano scale, and the spacing between the alphabets is 60 nanometers. So this is an excerpt from that famous lecture by Richard Feynman, and this was used writ- this was written by using tip pen nanolithography. So just imagine over 1,000 copies of this text can fit on the head of a pen. So I find this very interesting and wanted to share with you all. This was his text, and I think his vision was really great, and we are moving in that direction. Another man, uh, K. Eric Drexler. He is sort of, there is a lot of debate about this, that who is the father of nanotechnology. But then Feynman is mostly considered the grandfather of nanotechnology because he gave this idea. And a scholar studying the historical development of nanotechnology has concluded that his actual role, Feynman's actual role in catalyzing nanotechnology research was limited, and the term nanotechnology gained serious attention in the early 1990s, that is 30 years after, following its use by K. Eric Drexler in his 1986 book, Engines of Creation, The Coming Era of Nanotechnology. It's very important to know that in retrospect, after this book came, then Feynman's lecture was, it was very important lecture, and it was given due recognition, but then it really picked up. So Feynman is called the grandfather of nanotechnology. By some call him the father of nanotechnology. You decide for that. So because he gave the idea, but most of the work was done after I work. So I should not say most of the research and all. Yeah, that was done after the 90s. After the 90s would be wrong to say, but not like Feynman had not much to do with the research about nanotechnology. Its popularization, his lecture was sort of retrospectively also, it gained momentum. That is one thing I wanted to convey. So, and nanotechnology word, if nanotechnology word, that was used by Taniguchi, a scientist, way before this man K. Eric Drexler used it, and Taniguchi used it like nano hyphen technology, and anyways, the Engines of Creation, this book was very popular book in 1986, and it really made nanotechnology, brought nanotechnology at the forefront. And one has to remember that inspired by Feynman's concept, he was inspired by Feynman's concepts, K. Eric Drexler, and after this, in this book, he proposed the idea of a nanoscale assembler, which would be able to build a copy of itself and of other items of arbitrary complexity with atomic control. And this was very revolutionary at that time. Other scientists, uh, Judd Binning and Rohrer, they won the 1986 Nobel Prize in Physics for inventing scanning tunneling microscope. So scanning tunneling microscope and is really a wonderful tool that helps us to see the atoms, manipulate them. So this was also very important. And Rohrer is also sometimes called the father of nanotechnology. And then who is considered the father of Indian nanotechnology? That is Professor C.N.R. Rao, Indian nanotechnology. So 96 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, 1996 Nobel Prize in Chemistry was given jointly to Harold W. Kroto, Professor Robert F. Curl, and Richard E. Smalley for their discovery of fullerenes. So this is Harry Kroto. He was popularly called Harold W. Kroto or Harry Kroto, sitting with his, buckyball structures. So this was also a momentous occasion in the discovery, in the timeline of nanotechnology. Then we had this man Sumio Ijama, who is credited with the discovery of carbon nanotubes. So carbon nanotubes also were a game changer, and still a lot of research is being carried on carbon nanotubes. So you see the electronics industry is getting smaller and faster all the time. Computer chips contain millions of transistors to run a variety of electronic devices, including computers, digital cameras, memory sticks. And biological materials are also getting like lot of help from nanotechnology. So I'll just, for example, some examples I'll give because time does not permit. So, for example, amorphous silica fume, nanosilica. This silica is normally thought to have the same human risk factors as non-nano, non-toxic silica dust. So, it is a nano product, but this has we have to consider the challenges of nanoscale also. I'll come to that later on, but I want to tell you, for example, this was when it came, it was considered a big revolutionary thing, but we have to see the toxicity effects also. So nano platinum or palladium in vehicle catalytic converters. So these have increased efficiency because of the high surface to volume ratio, or crystalline silica fumes used as an additive in paints and all. So these are some of the examples, but nano is there in nature also. So gecko, the nano adhesion mechanism of this animal gecko, it has got rows of sticky leaves or lamellae. Okay, so basically science does imitate nature. Okay, so they are trying to design such nano adhesive things, and they will have, this is a toy Spider-Man. So they want to, make those robots that can climb and all. So for that, they want to use those nano adhesive mechanism, and they take it from that animal gecko. So the research is underway for this. It can have great implications if you think about it. So Spider-Man is also just not a fiction. They want to make it also reality. So that way, it is just an example that I wanted to give you to just bring home the point, the endless possibilities that nano has. But with anything, the title of my talk was The Promise and the Challenge. So what is the challenge? Challenges of this time scale. See, it is too small for direct measurements. You can't measure directly nanoparticles. Too large to be described by theoretical and computational methods. Still, for example, my PhD was in computational nanochemistry, and though there is a lot of increase in the computational power, still a lot of time does go in simulating these, and they exhibit too many fluctuations, so can't be treated monolithically in time and space, and they're too few to be described properly by a statistical ensemble. These are the challenges of this scale, and like we need to know this nanotoxicity or nanophytotoxicity, nanocytotoxicity. These are also emerging areas, because see, it is a very new technology, new in the sense that it was already there, but now it is being used in so many products. In the market, there are over 800 products that use nanotechnology, commercial products. So we don't know the side effects. We don't know what are the adverse effects of these nanoparticles, because you see, all is well, size, properties changing, but we see the positive things, but we don't know how properties are changing for the worse. So a lot of research is needed for that, and now slowly and very gradually, scientists all around the globe are gearing up for that, for trying to find out what are the toxicity challenges, what are the problems associated with nanotechnology, and are there any problems to the environment? Can it create potential problems for the environment? All these things that are challenges, and because thing is, we don't know anything much about the effect it has once the nanoparticles enter the human body. We don't know. Once it enters the crops, we don't know. So that is what now the research is actually focusing on that also. Many groups all over the world are working on that also. So as in any technology, advantages are there, but disadvantages are also there. So one has to be very cautious about it, and that is the thing that I would like to emphasize again and again in my talk, that the promise is really very great of nanotechnology, but you must think about the potential harmful effects also to the environment and to other like to the climate and all. So that so in the next module, I'll discuss with you all how you can incorporate. First of all, I'll discuss about these environmental implications. A bit about my research. I won't bore you much about that, but I would want to discuss that with you all, and then how you can incorporate it in the pedagogy. So we'll do all that in the next module.